got home and found all my stuff packed outside. My daughter was in tears and didn't want to talk to me. Have the past secrets you thought you buried far away ever came back to haunt you in your present life? Secrets that I completely forgot about have resurfaced, and now it's threatening my marriage and relationship with my daughter. I almost ran mad when I got to my home and found all my stuff basically scattered everywhere outside, and then my teary daughter did something unexpected. I'm a wife and a mother, and getting thrown out of my home is the last thing I expected. Jay thought I was running mad, or maybe someone had broken into my home, but unfortunately for me, that was not the case. I mean, I'm not a smoker, so I knew I wasn't hallucinating. I got into the house and was welcomed by my daughter crying. Look, I'm still in shock even 2 weeks later. The way she cried and stared at me like I did something so wrong broke my heart. I looked everywhere for my husband, but I didn't see him that day. Surprisingly, my daughter refused to talk to me no matter how hard I tried. All she did was hand me a note from my husband that said I must leave the house. Yes, that's what was written in the note. Now I know this sounds surreal and you all must be confused. Just like I was confused when I saw my things outside and the note that instructed me to leave the home I had lived in for 20 years. Well, it's a complicated story that may involve cheating and deep secrets that are honestly disgusting. When I left the house that day, I could have just pretended like nothing happened and moved on with my life. But my desire to save my 70 years of marriage has left me unraveling the biggest secrets of my life. Judge me as you want, but please do not open my healing wounds. I don't know what's going on, but I do have secrets that I suspect might be the cause of this. Kindly bear in mind that the names I'll be referring to are not real in this story. I do not want to reveal our identities in case of further damage. Everybody is on here these days, so I need to protect my family. I will not be boring you with any background stories. All I'll be putting on here is that I am married, and I have been married for over 20 years. I'm 43 years old, and my husband is 45 years old. My name is Sylvia, and my husband's name is Desmond. We have an 18-year-old daughter, Diva. Diva is in her last year of high school now. Honestly, I got married early, but it was never a problem because I've always wanted to marry early. My marriage with Desmond started out great, and it stayed that way even after the birth of Diva 2 years later. But everything changed after our 5-year anniversary. I won't directly call myself hot, but I'll just say men have always found me attractive even till this day. This was almost a problem at the start of our marriage, but I was so innocent and naive that the thought of cheating sounded like the death penalty for me. And Desmond knew this, so what almost became an issue died down quickly. But with time, I started having the forbidden thoughts. I literally got married immediately after college at the age of 23. That meant I hadn't explored men before. In fact, my husband was the only man I had ever been with, and I married a virgin. I was raised by very strict parents with limited computer devices, so my mind was never corrupt. But with time in my marriage, I began to notice the massive male attention I managed to attain even without trying. Specifically, this started after our 5th-year anniversary. Everything is peculiar to this time because that's the time we moved to another state. We were in Arizona before, but we decided to move to New York since Desmond had gotten a better job opportunity there. We got to a new environment without my parents' watchful eyes or my idleness as a housewife and mother of a toddler. That sounded weird, right? Okay, let me explain. First of all, even though I was married, my parents' strict aura never faltered. They still visited and kept an eye on me. I'm an only child, and my parents, especially my father, had always been keen on me taking only the right steps in life. According to them, they want to die knowing that their only child never turned out bad. At first, I understood their obsession with making sure I was doing the right thing, but every time it got frustrating and annoying. I was already 28 years old by them and a mother to a 3-year-old. I felt like I just needed to stop being watched and develop as a human being independently. Secondly, I had been a housewife for 3 years at that point. I worked for the first 2 years of marriage, but after my very risky pregnancy, I got a health scare and had to recover at home and also become a committed nursing mother. Thankfully, Desmond's new job opportunity came at the right time. At that point, I was so frustrated with my parents and tired of staying at home in the same environment that I didn't mind moving to a new place in a new state. But on the outside, I didn't show any enthusiasm at all because Desmond was anxious and my parents were not happy at all. I tried to pretend like I was also not happy about moving, but nope, I was elated. I mean, who wouldn't be? I was 28 freaking years by that time, and most 12-year-olds had seen the world more than me. I was suffocated and tired of being guided every step of the way. I didn't even know who I truly was because I seemed to be following a handbook on life. Now don't confuse these facts, please. I didn't have any issues in my marriage. We were living great, and Desmond was supportive as a husband and even better as a father. He provided for the family, and that provision even doubled after we moved to New York. New York. We all know about New York, right? The place where you can find the rich hustling and bustling like never before. My parents hated the idea of me coming to New York of all places, but I just couldn't say no to coming. We got a condo and settled in barely 5 days after staying in a hotel. Desmond's job was lucrative as hell, so money at that time wasn't a problem. At first, I was extremely busy with enrolling Diva in school, knowing her school schedule and trying to join the PTA and everything parent-related. I badly wanted to make sure she didn't hate the chance to feel it too much. I'd always loved Arizona my whole life, so I didn't know how change would be for a 3-year-old. Desmond was also worried, so I made sure she settled in fine. After making sure my daughter got comfortable, it was now time for me to settle in and make friends. First, I started off with getting familiar with places other than Diva's school. I would go out to eat once in a while, go shopping, or do one thing or another every day. I did that because I wanted to live a little and see the world. I knew that for most people, New York was a destination place or a vacation location where they caked to relax and let off steam. I had moved into New York, so I wanted to make the best of it. I asked Desmond to take time off work so we could go for picnics at the beach or go for ice cream. But Desmond had just resumed his new position at his new place of work, so he had to work hard to make a good impression. We had already spent a lot of money and he needed to make sure he kept the lucrative job. I completely understood that and didn't want to be a hindrance to his work. Desmond was kind enough to send money and tell me to go for ice cream once in a while or even go shopping as often as I wanted. Of course, I was more than happy to do that. And that's how it all began. I can swear that before moving to New York, I've never had secrets before. But after moving to New York, I started keeping secrets. Men, oh men. Men stared everywhere I went. Yes, I know I am in good shape. At least my Gen Z daughter has called me Coca-Cola shaped and claims I have facial features that are to die for. Back then, the attention was very new to me. People started in Arizona, but I was either with my husband or parents, so it was never too obvious. But in New York, no one cared. Not even the huge wedding ring on my finger stopped men from approaching me and trying to pay when I shopped at boutiques. I never told Desmond about it. I don't know why, but even though I wanted to, I kept the new attention I was getting to myself. Normally, I'd talk to my mom and she would have immediately stopped me from going out, but she wasn't there, nor was my father. And the thought of Desmond ending my freedom because of the attention I was getting made me shut my mouth. From one of my shopping escapes, I made a new friend. We had ran into each other so many times after exchanging numbers that we practically became besties. My only best friend before was my mom, and my closest friend was Desmond's cousin, who was also married. So there was basically nothing like a best friend other than family. Her name is Tina, by the way. Through Tina, I made a bunch of friends out of the blue. Tina never ceased to tell me how beautiful I was. She claimed I didn't even know it, and I was clueless. It was all just funny words to me till she encouraged me to use my influence on men to get free passes. It started as casual talks, but she got serious. I was confused by the concept of what she meant, but then my other friends explained it. And that's how my bold lifestyle started. I started entertaining men, and they started paying for everything I dared look at. It all started with giving out my number to flirting and then going for coffee. I was literally spiraling out of control. No one could tell me anything because I suddenly got aware of my looks. I felt so powerful, and the thrill of running around New York with rich men and having them treat me like a glass that could break any time was surreal. In fact, the money Desmond offered me wasn't enough anymore because I was bringing designer bags and shoes home. My wardrobe got bigger and fuller, and then I made Desmond get me a walk-in closet. Desmond finally noticed something was wrong and asked me about it. I just told him it was all the money he gave me. My husband is clueless about fashion, so the bags looked like normal bags. Like always, stuff like that always started with flirting, right? And then it would graduate to something else. Previously, none of the men I'd flirted with grasped my attention like Jim and Timothy. Jim was just too charming, and I lusted after him badly. It started out as harmless fantasies till I got too invested. I thought he'd be okay with just kissing, but Jim wanted more. I tried to resist, but then he threatened to end things. He claimed not to have time for flirting and wanted more. I was too smitten to say no, so I committed adultery. Jim was the first man I slept with that wasn't my husband. At first, the guilt kicked in and I couldn't look my husband in the eye. But then the bad friends I had made told me I was being too naive. According to them, sharing men and women was not a crime. Because I'd never lived like that before, I was too inexperienced to close out the noise and make things right. I couldn't even dare telling my parents because I knew how it would end. And my only best friend back at home was my husband's cousin. Of course, I knew where her loyalty lay. So I had to keep running back to Tina and our group of friends for advice, and they never gave me good advice, by the way. Things with Jim ended just 6 months after it started because, of course, I discovered that he was a player who only wanted to know how it felt to go under my skirt. Barely 6 months after ending things with Jim and hooking up with 2 other guys once each, I met Timothy. Timothy. I cannot believe that at almost 30 years I was so foolish. I thought I had fallen in love with my guardian angel. Oh my goodness, I have to facepalm myself right now, lol. I was a married woman with a child who thought she had fallen in love. Timothy and I did a lot of things together, things that I had never even done with my husband. He made me feel like there was no need to have guilt like I did with Jim. I literally became his mistress because guess what? Timothy was also married. His wife traveled often for work while he was fully based in New York, so her matrimonial home became the place to commit adultery. Oh, how stupid I was back then. I would put on Timothy's clothes and move around the house like his wife. I even used his wife's shoes and walked around. I would finish up fast before going to pick Diva from school. That I never played with. Even though I had become a cheating wife, I never joked with my daughter. I can boldly say that I was a fully present mother. Whenever she was in J school, I could do whatever. But when she was back, I dedicated my time to her. Timothy and I became 2 peas in a pod. He took me to eat out and we went on picnics for as fast as we could. We were very careful because we were well aware of the fact that we were both married, so things had to work out carefully. I didn't want to get caught, and he also didn't want to get caught. I mean, considering the fact that Desmond was already stressed with work, I didn't want him to see me as a disappointment. According to Tina, it was all going to be fine as long as Desmond didn't find out. With time, even I believed that this was true. I felt like his lack of knowledge would make things better, and it wouldn't hurt anybody if none found out. But Desmond wasn't dumb. He started noticing my change of attitude, even though it took him 4 years to know something was wrong somewhere. He saw the designer bags eventually. At that point, we already lived in New York for 4 years, so he started having knowledge about the expensive lifestyle and luxury brands. So he had doubts when he began to see those items with me very often, and he finally confronted me. He didn't just rush into it. He gathered huge amounts of evidence and confronted me with a lot of facts. I could tell that he was extremely angry when he started asking questions. I'd never seen him that angry before, to be frank. I couldn't brush the questions away because there was no excuse to make. I could tell that he already knew that I wasn't funding that lifestyle with his money. And of course, he knew I didn't have money of my own because I wasn't working. So there was obviously a third party in question. Our daughter was already 7 years old at that point. I'd grown a little tired of Timothy because frankly, our relationship almost became like marriage. The thrill of it at first was gone. I didn't want to risk my family for him anymore because I just didn't want to continue the relationship. It made no sense anymore, and Desmond's suspicious scared me and made me realize that commitment was better than divorce. I knew my parents would never forgive me if I got divorced or if they found out I cheated after all their strict and protective parenting. It was a no-brainer that Timothy and I had to end things. I knew there was no freaking way I'd tell Desmond the truth and risk getting served divorce papers out of the blue and losing my marriage and ruining my daughter's life. So I told him half a lie and half a truth. I lied that there was a guy who was giving my friend gifts to give me because he liked me. I told him I'd never met the man before, but he was going through my friend Tina. I even swore on my life and made up evidences and fake chats with Tina. Tina also played along and testified that I'd truly never met the man. We came up with so much facts and evidence that even I started to believe it. It looked extremely real. With our display, I was able to get out of that situation without a divorce. Though Desmond was angry about me taking the gifts without his knowledge, he forgave me after 2 months of punishing me with no allowance and giving me an unnecessary attitude. But we were able to move past that. I blocked Timothy and stopped entertaining any advances from men. Desmond was still very protective to the extent that when he got the opportunity, he quit his job in New York and announced that we were moving back to Arizona. Thanks to his friend, he got a good referral back in Arizona for a job that only paid a lot more than the one in New York. The difference wasn't much, so I asked why we didn't just stay in New York. Desmond said he liked it back home. Even though that was his response, deep down I knew that he was just making sure I didn't end up cheating on him. He had no ideas that I already did. To him, he was taking me out of a threatening environment filled with men that sent me money anonymously. I didn't want to protest because I was aware that would be a sign that I actually cheated on him. So just like that, we returned to Arizona after 5 years of living in New York. Diva was already 8 years old and I was 33 years old while Desmond was 35 years old. My parents were more than happy to have us back in Arizona, and of course they resumed being protective, which I suspected was Desmond's plan all along. But at that point in my life, I had done and experienced so much that it didn't bother me anymore. I decided to hurry New York and its events behind me and never mention it to anyone. I even went as far as blocking all the friends I made there, including Tina. I did get a job in Arizona, though, and life was great. Life has been great even 10 years after we moved back to Arizona. So 10 years later, we're here now, but my life is now falling apart. The secrets of the past are now threatening to show up after 10 years. I can't even believe it. This is the wrong time for this. I am 43. What will I do if I get divorced now? My daughter doesn't want to speak to me. She mentioned something like betrayal when she cried and shoved me out of the house after giving me the note Desmond wrote. I do not know what to do, guys. I need help. I'm 100% sure that it's my life in New York that's haunting me. Otherwise, I haven't done anything that would send me out of the house. Please help me. What could it be? What should I do? Do you think it's my past resurfacing or something entirely different? Update. My past resurfaced. It's a year since this post and you all have been asking for an update. Well, I answered the question immediately. It's my past that found its way back to haunt me mercilessly. After brainstorming and trying to find a crease somewhere, the truth started unfolding when Desmond visited me with divorce papers. I had moved in with his cousin who mercifully accepted me in because she was just as confused. I refused to sign the divorce papers because I had no idea what was going on. I followed Desmond to the house against his wish and demanded he answer all my questions. I also asked Diva to explain why she was a crying mess and why she shoved me out of the house. I also demanded to know why they packed my things out. Initially, I didn't want to leave that night, but after calling Desmond's cousin, she advised me to come and give them space till I figured out what was going on. I was so confident when I confronted them because I just didn't imagine that my cheating escapees that started 15 years ago and ended 11 years ago would suddenly find its way back to my life. But my confidence got crushed when the truth finally found its way to light. I was left embarrassed, disappointed, betrayed, and speechless. Desmond had gone back to New York a week before I was sent packing for a visitation to see his friend there. Initially, his friend was supposed to come and see him, but something came up and he had to go. It happened so fast that he wasn't able to tell me on time. Apparently, he ran into Tina there. He had been going to New York to and fro over the last 10 years, but this time he ran into her. But guess what? Tina decided to tell him the truth and show him pictures because she was bitter. I cut ties with her after she helped me cover up. She also did it for money because apparently she got bankrupt after I left, reached out to me for help, but I discovered I blocked her. So she held a grudge, and when she saw Desmond, she gave him information in exchange for money. I was basically sold out by the last person I would have suspected. I tried to explain, but Diva and Desmond didn't want to hear any explanation. Desmond told me he was never going to forgive me. It was hard for him to let it go because I lied to him instead of telling him the truth when I had the chance. He couldn't believe that I played him for 15 years. Diva was obviously embarrassed and disappointed and said she wasn't ready to speak to me yet. I eventually signed the divorce papers and moved out of his cousin's house. She wanted me to stay even though she was disappointed, but I was too embarrassed to live under the same roof with her. My parents? I don't even want to recount how they shattered me into pieces with their words. They disowned me on the spot. Though Diva comes to see me once in a while, I've basically lost my whole family. If not for my job that's sustaining me as well as my savings, I don't know what I'd have done. Karma is real and mine came 15 years later, but it still smashed me into pieces.